Number 8. Heinrich Himmler. When thinking about evil people, a lot of people are quick to say Hitler, and for good reason too. But what about the other Nazi leaders? Surely Hitler wasn't the only one committing atrocities during the dark period that was the Holocaust. There were many who perpetrated and stood for the inhumane beliefs of the Nazi Party, not just the leader of the Third Reich. Heinrich Himmler was one of them. Heinrich started life off as the humble son of a schoolteacher, but would soon come to the dark side when World War II broke out when he was just a teenager. He became involved with Nazi activities and served as their propaganda leader for 4 years until he got promoted. This new job allowed him to serve up close and personal with the famous mustachioed man as the head of the SS, Hitler's bodyguards. With his new connections, Heinrich's power soon grew, and in 1933 he became the head of the police. It was in this same year he ordered the construction of Dachau, the first concentration camp of the Holocaust. Just like his boss, Heinrich was obsessed with German racial supremacy. Using his position of power, he set up and promoted breeding programs for Aryan citizens. Then, with the chaos of the Second World War, he started pursuing a much more sinister goal: the annihilation of the Jewish people. He didn't even consider Jews to be people. That's how deeply his hatred ran. As head of the police, Himmler had total control of the Einsatzgruppen, otherwise known as the section of the SS specializing in killing. He ordered these men to assist in the mass murder of disabled people, the Jewish, opposing government leaders, and more. At one point in time, he ordered over 33,000 people in Kiev to dig their own mass grave, then stand in it as they were shot like livestock. A rough estimate says about 1.5 million people died in a similar way during this period. By playing a leading role in the deadly final solution of taking so many innocent lives and establishing labor concentration camps where workers would ultimately meet a gruesome end, Heinrich is responsible for the deaths of over 2 million people. This makes him one of the most evil men in history. 7. Ivan the Terrible. Russia has been a great and powerful nation for centuries and is often regarded as having some of the strongest men and women in the world. So if that's what people think about their regular citizens, what would their leaders be like? Well, let us introduce you to the first Tsar of Russian history, Ivan the Terrible. And as his name would imply, he wasn't exactly a nice guy. He amassed the mega country that is Russia by creating an unstoppable military force and ruthlessly seizing the land of his enemies. As the grandson of Ivan the Great, this fearsome leader had a lot to live up to. Both of his parents died before his 9th birthday, leading to a vicious battle for the throne. It was really no place for a child to grow up, and it sort of provides an explanation for his ruthless behavior later on in life. And as if that wasn't bad enough, he apparently thoroughly enjoyed torturing small animals as a kid. So, as you know, one of the token signs of a sociopath or future murderer. When his first wife died in 1560, Ivan became deeply depressed, which historians theorize sparked some later outbursts. He suspected that someone had murdered her, so he responded by having any and everyone that could even possibly be a traitor executed. He also enjoyed torturing his political rivals. Just a few of his favorite methods were impaling people, roasting a man over a fire, slowly having limbs torn off by horses, or boiling people alive. At one point, Ivan started to believe the church was against him too, so he had all the priests and monks collected and beaten to death. It's believed that he killed about 12,000 people in these gruesome methods, but it could actually be more. And as if that wasn't bad enough, as Ivan got older, so did his mind. He already was thought to have had mental issues at an early age, but they became more severe with the years. As an older man, Ivan one night accidentally walked in on his daughter-in-law while she wasn't fully dressed. In response to this, he beat her nearly to death. And here's a kicker: she was pregnant. Her injuries were so bad that she had a miscarriage. Upon hearing the news of his wife, Ivan's son confronted his father. But this would be the last thing he ever did. Ivan killed his son with his very own hands. If that's not evil, we don't know what is. 6. Leopold II of Belgium. Do you know anything about Belgium's history of monarchs? Unless you were born in the country itself or a neighboring one, the answer is probably no, or at least not much. But hiding in this line of royalty is a sinister man with a heart full of hatred and his mind that only had one thing on it: power. His name was Leopold II. As ruler of a tiny European country, Leopold craved more. His neighbors of the British and Spanish were busy establishing colonies all over the world, while he had none. So you can imagine his delight when the world powers decided to give him control of the Congo in the 1880s. His new territory was almost 80 times bigger than the whole country of Belgium. But the people in the Congo had no clue what was about to happen. Leopold essentially set up a system of slavery in the Congo, so he could profit off of the hard work of his new people. He even taxed these workers who were basically working for nothing, and if they couldn't pay up, he held their wives and children captive. When the Congo people were fed up, they tried to revolt and push back, but Leopold wasn't ready to lose his new powers. He sent his private army to burn villages down and decapitate the uncooperative while killing women and kids. And if this doesn't sound all that bad, just wait until you hear how many people were affected. Historians who studied the event say that over 8 million people were killed as a result of the harsh conditions Leopold placed on the Congo. When the tyrant finally died, a year after Europe took back his rule over the Congo, much of the world rejoiced. Did you know anything about Leopold II? Let us know in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. 5. Nero. The Roman Empire was one of the greatest civilizations this world has ever seen, but that had little to do with the greatness of some of their leaders, one of which being Nero, the bloody ruler. Coming into power at 17 years of age, he was the youngest emperor Rome had ever seen. We'd like to remind our viewers that the mind of a 17-year-old is far from being fully developed or mature. The reign of Nero only lasted 14 years, but in that short amount of time, the young ruler managed to attract the hate of a nation. One of the things he's most famous for is playing the fiddle during the Great Fire of Rome. This nonchalant attitude, while much of the city was up in flames, led many to believe he had a role in setting the fire for his own agendas. When the embers died down, he blamed the Christians for the spread and used the opportunity to slaughter them. He even used some human torches to light up his estate. Thousands were killed by his orders, nailed to crosses, fed to dogs or lions, or starved to death. On top of this, Nero was responsible for the deaths of his mother, stepsister, wives, stepbrother, and more of his close relatives. He was a raging satromaniac, the male version of a nymphomaniac, and often raped women and men alike. He even cut off the genitals of some of his victims. After finally getting tired of his thoughtless, harsh antics, a political uprising overthrew the young emperor, forcing him to take his own life. The last words that left his mouth were, "What an artist died in me." Yeah, he was a real artist. From hell. 4. Killer Countess. In all of vampire lore and mythology, the most famous bloodsucker has to be Dracula, rivaled only perhaps by Edward from Twilight. But as far as female creatures of the night, Elizabeth Bathory is said to be history's most well-known female vampire. Well, we don't know if she was actually a bloodsucker, that's all just speculation, but we'll let you decide after you hear the terrible things the famed Countess did. On top of being a so-called vampire, Elizabeth is also a brutal serial killer. At the age of 11, she became betrothed to HEINRICH Nastadi, a young man from a wealthy Hungarian family. Sadly, the girl had a secret lover who wasn't so high in rank. The two of them had a child together, and when her fiancé found out, he was furious. HEINRICH had her lover's genitals cut off, then threw into a pit to be eaten by dogs. Not exactly the best impression to leave on your future wife. While they were married, HEINRICH was often away from the estate, leaving Elizabeth to do as she pleased, which not only involved having affairs, but torturing innocent girls. It all started with a daughter of nearby peasants who served as servants of the Countess's castle. She had a strange belief that the blood of these young women would keep her youthful and beautiful, so she did what any appearance-obsessed psychopath would do. She killed them and bathed in their blood. Her method of murder was especially bloody. Sometimes she would stab them, and other times she'd bite their body parts or cut them with scissors. She was even reported to burn them with hot metal and stab their lips with needles. After her deeds were discovered, she was confined in a room in isolation. She would have received a harsher punishment if only her status wasn't so high. The vampire countess died alone in her room in 1614, hopefully being cursed in the afterlife by her many victims. 3. Josef Mengele. Everyone knows how horrible the Holocaust was. As the Nazi Party oversaw the extermination of millions, their bloody streak on history was deathly apparent. And one man, a doctor, if you dare call him that, performed gruesome experiments on prisoners at the notorious Auschwitz concentration camp. Close to 500,000 Jewish people lost their lives thanks to the orders of Dr. Josef Mengele, but he kept some of them alive for medical experiments. His goal was to learn the secrets of humanity to create the ultimate Aryan super race. Mengele was especially obsessed with twins. He thought they were somehow superior and the answer to all his questions. One of his harsh experiments including him impregnating a young twin girl with sperm from yet another twin imprisoned by him. The girl was pampered and cared for during her 9 months of pregnancy, but after Mengele realized she would not give birth to a pair of twins, he ripped the child out of her uterus and threw it into a nearby oven. A survivor of Auschwitz described how she had given birth at the camp. After the child was born, the mother's breasts were bandaged. The doctors simply wanted to see how long a baby could last without food. Eventually, the mother was ordered to kill her own child with an injection of morphine. These accounts are just a fraction of the atrocities Josef committed. He truly had no respect for human life or sympathy for the men, women, and children he tortured and killed. 2. Baby farmer. Although not nearly as prolific a killer as some other names on this list, Amelia Dyer is one of the most well-known murderers in the history of England. In her early life, she served as a nurse and midwife for expecting mothers, but a few years later, she would shift trades to become a baby farmer. Not exactly the most welcoming of job titles. Baby farmers were known to adopt illegitimate children for a fee, saying the child would grow up in a welcoming and loving environment. If you can read the title of this video, then you know that's not what happened. Not at all. At first, Dyer refused to feed the children in her care, forcing them to starve to death. Later on, she'd use a more efficient method. By using a syrup with opium in it, ironically called Mother's Friend, and then murdering the young ones in her care. She was eventually found out after the body of a young child was found in the Thames and traced to Amelia. When the police came to her estate to investigate, they were immediately overwhelmed by the smell of death. Strangely, though, no bodies were discovered in the house. But as more children were found in the river, she admitted that the ones she killed had white tape on their necks. She's reported saying, "That was how you could tell it was one of mine." It's believed Dyer killed anywhere from 200 to 400 kids with this method. Because of her emotionless attitude towards killing, some believe she could even be the notorious mysterious killer Jack the Ripper. But that's only a theory. Even if she wasn't, she was still an extremely evil lady. 1. Ilse Koch. In 1930, a young woman named Ilse Koch joined the Nazi Party. She, along with many Germans at the time, were drawn to the party's ideals of fixing Germany and getting back the reparations the world owed them after World War I. Eventually, she married Karl Otto Koch, the commander of the Buchenwald concentration camp. Koch used her husband's rank to her advantage. She gathered up the money taken from incoming prisoners and used it for herself. She ordered the construction of a $62,000, nearly $1 million today, dollar arena to be built just so she had a place to ride her horses around. At Buchenwald itself, she'd often taunt prisoners and whip them. It's reported that she even seemed excited when children were sent to their deaths at the gas chambers. But this isn't what earns her a place on this list. Ilse had a disgusting hobby of collecting items made out of human skin. She would inspect those being held in the camp and pick out prisoners with interesting tattoos. At her order, they were then skinned alive and sent to be incinerated. Some of the items she made included lampshades, covers for books, and even gloves she'd wear as some kind of sick trophy. Evil. No doubt. Thanks for watching. Which of these people do you think were the most evil? Do you know of any others that should be on the list? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time. Bye.